Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Melee's Turnwheel, the series that takes a retroactive look at the Fire Emblem franchise chapter by chapter. I'm your host, I'm Melee Kirby, and today we're taking it back to chapter 3 of Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. Hope everyone had a good New Year's. I'm recording this on New Year's Eve, the last day of 2020. In fact, by the time I finish, will definitely be 2021. These usually go on for about an hour and a half, and recording takes longer than that, and it's already 11:30, so definitely going to be 2021 by the time I'm done. So happy New Year, and I hope that 2021 is better for you than 2020 was, unless 2020 was great for you. Probably not, but it's possible, I guess. So not a whole lot going on this week, although every time I do one of these, I look on Serenus Forest to kind of see any headlines that are going on. It's probably the closest thing to a news site that there is for this, I guess, other than like Reddit or something. But I did not realize how frequently Heroes comes out with new stuff. I don't cover Heroes because I don't play Heroes, and I don't really have any context for this stuff, so I usually just stay away from it. But I mean, is this normal? Like, we've gotten like 4 banners in the past month. It's really weird. I did not realize that it was that frequent. Maybe it's just a holiday thing. I have no idea. Yeah, I mean, there's a new banner. If you care about that, it's got like Keaton and Valoria on it, and a couple of Heroes OCs that I don't know anything about. So yeah, that's why I don't talk about Heroes news. I don't have any context for how good these characters are going to be. So yeah, I guess I might as well talk about this now since this is something I've thought about addressing. We might as well get it out here. I know that obviously some characters from the main series are in Heroes, and they get a little extra characterization. They get some base conversations. They get like the level 40 dialogue when you max out their level. They have like a little speech, and I think that it's fair to want me to talk about that. I mean, it's not like anyone's been asking me, but I've thought about it personally. But that's just like a whole thing. I don't want to play a game and get every character and look at every character, look up, because there's so many of them now. And I just I don't want to, like, how much is Finn's level 40 conversation going to tell me about him that I couldn't just get from playing the games? Maybe a lot. Maybe I'm not giving it enough credit, but I just wanted to talk about that because I know that it's something that maybe some point someone might bring up. Just why don't you ever talk about some of the heroes' characterization? Just because I don't know anything about the game, and it's just a lot of additional research for what would probably amount to not a lot of extra gain from it, I guess. But I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe I'll start doing it at some point, but I don't have any plans for it right now. In terms of what I've been doing, I've actually been playing an Iron Man of FE8. Probably the easiest game in the series. I don't normally play Iron Man runs because I'm not very good at Fire Emblem, to be quite frank. But I wanted to try one. I mean, I've done them before, but I've never finished one. And not because I lose, usually just because I get petered out. I'm pretty good at like not losing. I might lose a few good units here and there, but I'm usually pretty good about keeping my lord safe and not getting a game over. So that's not usually the problem. It's usually just I get bored and peter out. But I'm sticking with it on this one. I'm about to start chapter 16, and so far only a few units have died. FE8 is actually really easy, and I took Ephraim route, which is considered to be the harder of the two route splits. So yeah, only Lute, Amelia, Noel, and Garrick have died. A combination of just like me being dumb and positioning them badly, and also in the case of Garrick, pretty bad luck, to be honest. But I mean, that's always a possibility, right? I guess in the case of Noel too, it was pretty bad luck, but I'm not gonna get into it. I've been having fun. I want to try a harder game. I wanted to do one that I thought I was actually gonna finish. So maybe I'll finish that this week. Not really anything else in terms of... I played Cinder Shadows. I think I had played it when I put out the last episode too, but I've had some time to let it stew in my mind, and I'm gonna talk... I don't know if I'm gonna talk about Cindered Shadows when I get to 3 Houses. Again, that's way, 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 way down the line, but eventually I will get to 3 Houses, hopefully, if I continue doing this, and I might talk about Cinder Shadows there, but I'm kind of thinking of a blanket no DLC thing, just because I don't have the DLC for any game except 3 Houses, and I don't really want to spend the money on that. So and then if I do it with one game, it would be inconsistent and not do it with the other one. So, it's a while before I have to make that decision. We don't get any DLC, at least any like paid DLC content until 13, which is a ways from now. But it's something I'm thinking about. But I guess just because it's fresh in my mind, and I you only get that experience once. I thought it was fine. I thought the last map was good, and I thought the escape map was good. Other than that, the maps were kind of bad. The story wasn't all that good, and I liked the limited play style. I guess like you were given so few options. This is something that the series really struggles with a lot of the time, because just by nature of the game, you're always going to have a variable team, and the developers have to plan around you having like any combination of units. They have to make it accessible. So it's a rare instance where the developers can know what you have access to and plan the maps around that. And in some instances, they do it really well. Like in some Radiant Dawn maps, the early maps of Conquest are really good about this, especially. But I don't feel like they really capitalized on it here. I really don't. I think there were a few moments. I think in the second to last map, there's some bolting sages, and I was like, how am I supposed to deal with these? This is such bullshit. But then I was like, oh, Ashe has a gambit that lets me counter them and just instantly deal with them, and that's cool. Like the developers can plan around you realizing that and taking advantage of it. So in any other, I mean, I've never played Maddening, so I don't know. Maybe that's just commonplace in the late game, but in the normal gameplay, that'd be pretty bullshit, honestly. I thought it was fine. I didn't love it, but it was okay. The DLC characters are actually really cool. I like Constance a lot. I think her gimmick is kind of dumb, but I like her out of the sun personality. I think is charming and funny, even though I think her out of the sun gimmick or in the sun gimmick is just kind of dumb. Yuri's cool. Balthus is all right. Happy's like I feel like I'm not riding the Happy wave, because everyone loves Happy, and I think she's cool. I just don't get I guess I don't get the hype. Maybe if I read more of her supports. I still haven't read all their supports, so who knows. They're fun to use in the main game too. Alright, I've been rambling on a whole bunch about my stuff, so this episode's already going to be pretty long, so I guess we might as well just get into it right now. Chapter 3, Lion-Hearted Eldigone. So if you recall, at the end of the last map, Sigurd had captured basically like half of Augustria, and Eldigone was really mad at him and said, hey, you better figure out how you're going to put a stop to this. And Sigurd's like, listen, I'm going to work it out. I'm going to make sure that before, I think he said a year. Give me a year, and I will return Augustria to Chagall. I just got to get everything sorted out first. And Eldigone says, okay, sure. And he leaves. He takes Chagall up to a castle up north where he'll be safe. Now, at this point, it's established to be 6 months after that. And despite Sigurd's efforts, there has been absolutely no progress made towards this goal. It seems like it's been more or less nothing accomplished whatsoever. Some Granville nobles moved in and have been abusing the locals and abusing their power, basically just kind of ruling with an iron fist. Now, Chagall up north has decided that he has waited long enough, and he is going to attack Sigurd and take back Augustria, even though it's only been 6 months. Eldigone is not too happy about that, and he kind of tries to talk him out of it, but to no avail. And when he finds out about this, he says something interesting. He says, I couldn't possibly fight Sigurd. And I thought that was cool, because it kind of shows that maybe he was putting up a little bit of a front last time. I mean, I talked about how he cared so much about his country, and he was willing to just murk Sigurd right then and there if he thought it would be in service to his country. But here he's kind of doubting himself a little bit. He's saying, like, he's a really good friend of mine. I don't think I could go through with it. Of course, eventually he does, but, at the time he's kind of having some self-doubt, which is in stark contrast to the end of last chapter, where he was very adamant and willing to duke it out right then and there. We cut up to a pirate group that kind of has their base of operations to an island north of Augustria, and they want to take advantage of the chaos and invade, but they have a captain, a young woman captain, who basically tells them, no, We are noble pirates. Something I found interesting about this part is that the opening text crawl refers to these guys as reviled pirates, but now this young woman captain is talking about them, and she says that they're heroic thieves now, and apparently they've developed a reputation as heroic thieves. So they can't even. It's a nitpick, but I just think it's weird that they can't even be consistent with this information like 2 minutes apart. I don't know. I thought it was weird. Like, do they have a reputation for being reviled, or do they represent something better than that now? This whole introduction to the pirates is really stupid. I mean, I know they need an excuse for the conflict, right? But here's how it breaks down. So basically, we don't know this yet, but this is Adine's sister, Bridget. And Bridget was kidnapped by pirates at a very young age and was raised by the former pirate captain and grew up to be the current captain. Now, it's not established how long ago the boss died, but it seems to be like relatively recently. But they seem to be like it seems like they've been following her, Bridget that is, for a little while now, so it couldn't have been like yesterday or whatever. They also refer to her, and this might just be a translation thing, but they use some wording that really confuses me as to like what they're talking about. They say that the captain, the pirates kind of go off to the side and talk to themselves, and they say the captain has gone soft, and they talk about how she was raised by the old captain, not actually his child, and therefore they don't respect her as being a legitimate captain. And it's like, all right, well, that's fine, but why did they not decide this way earlier? Like when she initially took over. And for another thing, what was the dad doing, right? Like if she was raised by the old captain and he was like either he was a murderous monster, in which case why did she turn out so good? Or he was doing the same thing, at which point why didn't they revolt a long time ago? This just makes no sense to me. Yeah, they decide that they're not going to respect her as the real boss and that they're just going to ignore her orders and go do their own thing. I don't get it. Like, I don't know why they didn't do this a long time ago. Now, this might be inconsistent information, or it might just be Sigurd in denial, but we cut back to Sigurd, and Sigurd finds out that Chagall is attacking him, and says that he was so close to withdrawing from Angustura and giving it back to Chagall. And like I said, the opening text crawl made it pretty explicit that that is not true at all. So either, again, it's another case of being inconsistent, or Sigurd's in denial and trying to justify it as like, oh, we were so close, when really they probably wouldn't have gotten it done in a year either. But there's no way to know. Deirdre comes up and says, hey, are you going on the battlefield again? And he says, yeah, but you can't come with me like last time because Seliph has been born, our child Seliph has been born, and we need you here to take care of him. And she kind of says, okay, I understand. And this is our first introduction to Seliph. He's obviously going to be an important character much later on because the second generation of the game takes place from the perspective of the children of this half's heroes. So Seliph is going to be a much more important character later on, but for right now he's just kind of name dropped. I always thought it was weird because it's been 6 months and Seliph was apparently just born, so I'm pretty sure the way that works out, there's really no way you could work around this. Deirdre was pregnant during chapter 2. Like, she was at least 3 months pregnant, probably, and she was on the battlefield fighting in the arena. It was not good. Seliph had a very real chance of things not ending well for him there, but whatever. I don't know why they didn't just make it 9 months, right? Like, why does that make a big difference? But it explicitly says 6 months, so I don't know, whatever. Sigurd pulls Shannon over, or Shannon, the Prince of Isaac, if you remember. It's been a little. I don't even think he appeared in chapter 2 at all, but we met him in chapter 1. He's the Prince of Isaac, and Sigurd is still holding onto him, and he's still, taking care of him. Essentially, he's his ward, more or less. He pulls him over and says, listen, Shannon, I need you to watch after my wife and child. And Shannon's like, all right, boss, I'll do it. And he seems very eager to take on the responsibility. It's cute. And then the battle starts. So one thing I want to draw particular attention to, because normally I'm going to make mention of this whenever it's significant, but I really like the music in this map. I think a lot of people like Chapter 2's music better. Personally, I've never been that huge of a fan of the Chapter 2 theme, but this is the wave right here. Like, I really like Chapter 3's theme music. It's fantastic. One of the best in the entire game. Maybe the best. Although Chapter 10's is also really good. Deirdre is locked to the castle. We do technically have control over her. We can have her go into the town and sell her items. I think she can fight in the arena, but she cannot leave the castle. She can't guard the castle either. So, for all intents and purposes, we're pretty much not able to do anything with her. I actually don't remember if I got her items off of her. I think I might have forgotten to take the silent staff off of her, but whatever. I'm pretty sure Julia rejoins with it, and if she doesn't, it's fine. I'll live. It's not that big of a deal. It's nice money, but, not the most important thing in the world. I think it's 15,000 gold, which is a good amount, but it's not, it's not super significant. So you're definitely going to want to do some housekeeping on her and make sure that she, if you need anything that's on her, you take it off of her before you leave the castle, because she's not going to be able to bring it to you otherwise. I guess she could still sell it and then you could get it from a different castle. I don't know. Now, when you're looking at this map and deciding what to do first, in pretty much every other map up to this point, it's been a pretty plain affair. Prologue kind of had two things you could do. You could either go straight left or you could go down to the first castle. But Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, you pretty much had one thing you could do. You had a straight linear path that you had to follow. There's not really anything you could do about it. This map has, its objective is in the north, but it also has groups of enemies coming from the northwest, the west, and then the east. So you have multiple fronts to be doing stuff on, and this is a big deal. This is the first map that actually gives you something to do in multiple locations. Again, Chapter 2 kind of, but there was Prologue kind of, but there was 4 enemies that you could take care of, and then after that it was pretty much nothing. In this, you have a whole wide open space that you can send different groups of players or groups of characters around to deal with. And another thing I like about this setup is that it allows foot units to contribute, because while your horse units are off securing the castle, you're going to need people to stay behind and deal with the people attacking your home castle. And people like Lewin, Aira, Holland, they can do that. And that's cool. It's not often that they give foot units something to do, and I'm going to make special note of it when it comes up because it's significant. The breakdown isn't super important. I usually send either Lex or a mage, like Azel or Lewin, to go deal with the armor knights and generals in the east. Finn with the Horse Slayer, he got the Horse Slayer last chapter at some point. He went off to deal with the guys on the left, and then I sent basically everyone else up north. This is where we would normally have the Brave Sword conversation. Now, Aira is dead for me, though, so she's not going to get that until way later. I just wanted to make note of it here, because this is normally where you'd be able to do it, and it's really good. Brave Sword works much like it does in every other game, although there's a few games where it's different. In Gaiden and Echoes, it's completely different. In those games, it's basically a killing edge. How do I explain a brave weapon? It's weird. It's like you get to attack. For every attack you do, you get 2 hits, essentially. So if you double attack, you get 4 hits. If you proc Astra, if you're Aira and you proc Astra, you get 10 hits, which is ridiculous. But unfortunately, because of my error last chapter, I have to wait for it, which is not fun, but is what it is. I hope that this doesn't pick up on the microphone. I don't think it will, but just switched over to January 1st, so there's some fireworks going off in the background. If they're there, I'll try to edit them out. If not, or if I don't pick them up, whatever. Take them as a celebration. Yeah, I mean that's really it. There's not a whole lot to talk about. The boss of the first chapter, or the first castle, is, I think he can be dangerous. He's speedy, so hit on him is kind of bad, but he was kind of a joke for me. The Brave Lance made really short work. Quan and Finn in general just kind of dick on him really badly. So I didn't really have anything notable to say. He's one of the few bosses going forward that doesn't have Pavice. So, it's a win in my book. I don't think he's that bad. He drops a Bolt Sword, which is cool. That's going to be fun to have on Fee, or maybe a promoted Azel. I've tried to give Azel some kills this chapter. I've been kind of neglecting him, but I want to try to get him up there. I don't even think he's level 10 yet, so he's probably not going to promote, but I don't know. Maybe I can make something out of him. You capture the first castle, and Teal2 and Claude show up. This is our first time meeting them. Actually, that's not true. Claude was in the opening narration that I complained about all the way back in episode 1, if you can believe it. Did he really need to be introduced here? I guess they wanted like a representative, or did he really have to be introduced there instead of here? I think they wanted a representative of all the houses, basically, and Claude was House Ida. He's the major. He is to House Ida as Sigurd is to Chalfie. He's able to use the holy weapon. He has major holy blood in his crusader lineage, so he's pretty important. Well-respected member of the clergy. People like him in general. Teal'c is Reptor's daughter. Reptor, if you remember, is someone who, I've talked about him before as being a main villain, but in the context of the game up to this point, we really only know that he has a grudge against Sigurd's dad and has been spreading bad rumors about Sigurd and his dad. And Teal'c is his daughter, so she's kind of like, she's funny. I like Teal'c. She's more or less just like, I don't know what the hell my father's doing, and I don't really care. I like Claude, so I'm just gonna follow him around. I think she's like his bodyguard or something, which is weird. I don't know why you would hire like a. I don't think she's a little girl. I think she's like 19 or something like that. But still, I don't know why you would hire her and only her as a bodyguard when you're going through like a pirate infested island to get to where you're going. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So they relay to Sigurd some news. Apparently. Well, I mean, we knew this, but Sigurd finds out here that Kurth has died. And, I mean, I know it's like the Middle Ages. I didn't think it would take 6 months for this information to get around, but no, yeah, apparently Sigurd's just hearing about it now for the first time, and he's really upset about it. He's very, understandably, like, damn, that really sucks. Just heard about Kurth dying. Damn, that shit sucks. Byron has gone missing, and as it stands, he's the prime suspect in his murder. But Sigurd brings up the point of like, hey, why does that make any sense? Because my dad was in like a really favorable, advantageous position and killing Kurth would have done absolutely nothing for him. Why would he do that? Wouldn't Reptor and Langbolt be the prime suspects since they stood to benefit the most from his murder? And Claude's like, yep, I have no idea how this is happening, but yeah, I agree with you, I believe you, and I'm on your side. But Langbolt and Reptor are doing a very good job convincing the king that it is your dad, and also apparently the king has fallen ill. And there's no evidence. That's the important thing, is that there's no evidence linking Reptor and Langbolt to the crime, so they don't really have anything to go on there. They kind of talk about Arvis here, and Sigurd's like, what's his stance on all this? And Claude's basically like, I don't know. It's hard to get a read on him. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Claude is going to the Tower of Bragi, where he will pray, and as a result of his prayer will be given the answers. Basically, because he is the inheritor of the major Bragi blood, if he goes to pray there, Bragi will reveal to him the truth, more or less, is what he says. I have written in my notes, Teal'c. The translation of her name in this is weird, but I've always referred to her as Teal'c, so that's how I'm just going to refer to her from now on. Teal'c, Squirrel Brain is what I have written down, because she reminds me, she just has her brain and her mouth go like a mile a minute. She reminds me of someone who has ADHD. As someone who has ADHD, I can definitely relate to that. I don't know. She's endearing. I like her. This is where they talk about how she's Reptor's daughter, and she's like, yeah, I can't wrap my head around what my dad is doing, and I like the priest, so I'm just kind of in this for him. Claude's exasperated. He seems kind of fed up with her already, which is fair. She's kind of annoying. But she and him go on their way to visit the Tower of Bragi and get the information that they're looking for. It's at this point that we cut back to the home castle, where Shannon and Deirdre are still there. And Deirdre, in a moment of desperation, I guess, she just really wants to see Sigurd again. She leaves. She just goes off on her own and goes to where Sigurd is. Or she tries to, but she makes it like 2 steps out the door, and she gets kidnapped by Manfroy. Manfroy shows up, talks to her for a little bit. She freaks out and tries to run away, but he casts some kind of spell on her that brainwashes her, and she says something about wiping the slate of her mind clean. So, I mean, later we find out that this means he gives her amnesia, basically. He just wipes all her memories of Sigurd, so she won't put up a fight, and he just takes her away. It's pretty grim. It's actually probably the darkest thing that's happened in this game up to this point. But yeah, Deirdre's just gone. And if he had anything on her that you wanted, oh well. The game kind of does this a couple times. It does it with Julia in Gen 2 too, although you get her back eventually, whereas you don't get Deirdre back. Spoilers, I guess. Shannon, before she leaves, puts in an honest effort to try to stop her and, make it so that she, she stays because Sigurd asked him to protect her. And she kind of, she kind of brushes him off and says, no, it'll be fine. Watch after Sela for me, though. And this has some interesting implications on Shannon's character. Maybe not explicitly, but I like to think that this moment is one of the most defining aspects of his character. I think he mentions it a couple times down the road. There are a few villages here that we can get right now. I think there's one that we actually can't get, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. No, wait, we can get it. Can we? I think so. I don't know. I'm just going to talk about all of them. So there's a couple villages that give you stat boosts. One gives you +3 strength, and then I think one gives you +1 defense. And I don't think any of the conversations here are interesting. I just wanted to talk about. I got the I got the defense village with, I don't remember. I think it was Lachesis or something. I don't know. Someone random, maybe Lex. I don't. It was somewhere in that area. But +1 defense is pretty negligible, honestly. It's pretty much pointless. The 5,000 gold is more valuable. And the strength village is +3 strength, so that's actually a pretty big deal. And I decided to give it to Beowulf. At the time, I don't think I had a reason, but in retrospect, I'm actually glad I did this because I'm going to have him use the Brave Sword for most of the time. So I think that he'll get good use out of that +3 strength because now, if he quadruples with the Brave Sword, suddenly that turns into +12 damage, which is really good. And then there is a Wing Clipper, which is just basically a sword that is effective against Pegasi and I think also Wyverns. I think this might be the only time in the series that we get some weapon that's specifically designed for taking out Pegasi and Wyverns, other than obviously like bows and wind magic in later games, but I think in this game too, obviously. This is the first time we get like a regular effective weapon. I think in Awakening, Beast Slayers are good against Pegasi and also Griffins, but not Wyverns, so it's weird. I think Dragon Slayers are good against... Oh yeah, Dragon Slayers are good against Wyverns normally, so there's been a few instances of this. But this is cool. I give it to Erin because I'm like, okay, well, this could be cool if I have her like go take on a horde of flying enemies. She can meet them in the air and hopefully deal with them. I don't know if it'll work out. She's pretty frail, so maybe that wouldn't work out. I don't know. And then in terms of interesting conversations, there's really only two here that I made note of. There's one where a woman is talking to you about her boyfriend, who is a cross knight, which is one of the knights that Eldigone commands. And there's two different versions of this conversation. One in which you have not fought them yet, because, spoiler, we're about to fight them, and one if you have fought them. And the first one, if you haven't fought them, is kind of cute. She says like, oh, the cross knights are so cool, my boyfriend is one of them, I'm so happy. And then if you have already fought them, she basically says, yeah, okay, so she says that her boyfriend was killed in the war, and she starts to blame Granville. She says it's all Granville's fault, but then she kind of stops herself and says, no, it's actually Chagall's fault, which is kind of, it's not that it wasn't obvious, but the people don't like Chagall very much. He's kind of a shitty king, and they're not happy about it. They're pretty much, sick of his warmongering. And then the other one that I thought was interesting was a village that talks about the Thracia Wyvern Riders. This is the first time that we get introduced to that concept. I don't think we've had an overview of the world map at all in this game, like with all the countries, but Thracia is a country that is kind of in the southeast and has Draco Knights. It's kind of a tradition in the series that one country will have more or less all of the dragons and like Draco Wyvern Knights, and then one country will have all of the like Pegasi in FE6, obviously. In FE7 it's like Ilia has all the Pegasi, and then Burn has all the Wyverns. I think Grotto has Wyverns in FE8, and then Frelia has the Pegasi, etc., etc. There are some exceptions to this, but I think for the most part that's how it goes down. And he talks about how they're like really deadly mercenaries that will, take on any job and are just super vicious. He describes them as being like a pack of hyenas. For transparency, I am getting these translations from the Serenus Forest because I forgot to look at some of the dialogue, so I missed some of the interesting conversations. So it might not say the exact same thing on the, if you're playing this with the Project Naga translation, but they get the idea across sufficiently enough. And that's pretty much all the villages. There's not a whole lot interesting to talk about with these ones. Pretty boring chapter overall in terms of that side of things. So after you, like a turn after you capture the first castle, it cuts over to Eldigone, who basically has given up trying to convince Chagall not to do this, and has decided that he is going to fight Sigurd. Even though he doesn't want to, he's going to do it anyway. So he has a moment actually where he talks to his cross knights, and they obviously don't have any dialogue, but he gives a very charismatic speech, and it shows that, because he basically admits to them that he's leading them into death, and they still follow him, which is cool. It kind of shows how inspiring of a leader he is. And then they kind of do so at this point the Eldigone and his knights are on the field, and you can fight them. And if you fight one of his knights with Sigurd, they have a little exchange where he says that we stand as two knights on the battlefield. And he kind of doubles back on this a little bit, and Sigurd's like, listen, I promise I'll have Chagall his kingdom back. You just got to give me a little bit more time. And he tells Sigurd that he's tired of his excuses, which, again, I don't know if he's putting on a front here, or if he's kind of, I think it's reasonable to assume that he's just torn. Like, he doesn't want to fight Sigurd, and he was at first doubting his confidence to do so. But at this point, I think he's kind of like steeled up and said, like, listen, you've been giving me a lot of excuses, and it's not enough anymore, and we just need to settle this once and for all. If you fight him personally with Sigurd, then he'll say that we are knights, this was fated. I don't know if those are his exact words, but he more or less just says, like, this is just who we are meant to be as knights. We're supposed to, for our respective countries, we're supposed to fight and die for what we believe in. He does a lot of posturing about what it means to be a knight in this dialogue, and I think it characterizes him well. He identifies Eldigone is what is known as a Camus archetype, or a Camus archetype. I've always referred to him as Camus, but it is canonically pronounced Camus because of Heroes. God, I really wish it wasn't, but I'm going to start calling him that from now on, I guess. He's a Camus archetype, which just means that he's a good person who's on the wrong side of history, and he doesn't want to fight the main character, and his home country is doing some really bad things that he doesn't want to stand for, but because he's so loyal, he does it anyway. And Eldigone is, I wouldn't say he's like the best example of one of these, but he's certainly not the worst. And I think that it does a good job conveying his motivations and, establishing what he stands for. Quan, I talked about this in chapter 1. I talked about how, even though they're sort of described as being a trio in some instances, and in the next game, and in Gen 2 of this game, their sons, Seliph, Ares, and Leaf, are also described as being a trio. They pretty much pay no lip service at all to Quan in this equation. And I mentioned in that moment that I didn't think they had any dialogue together outside of their battle conversation. Well, guess what? They don't have a battle conversation. There is just nothing. They never interact at all, which is crazy to me. Like, there's a cipher artwork that depicts them as a trio. Like, anything at all? Not even just like a little brief conversation about, like Quan trying to convince him to step down and it doesn't work. Anything. Like, I'll take anything, for God's sake. Just give me something. It's just weird. And again, it's even weirder in Thracia because they talk about like Ares, Seliph, and Leaf as like this trio of Lightbringers or whatever. And it's like, man, I don't even think Leaf and Ares have a conversation together. I don't know why are they setting this up as like a trio, Three Musketeers type deal when it just doesn't go anywhere. They don't build. I don't even want to say that they don't do it in an interesting way. They just don't do it at all. Like, they say they set it up and then it just goes nowhere, is basically my point. And I don't want to drag this on for any longer than it's going on already, but It's just weird to me. I don't get it. Now, you don't actually have to fight Eldigone, and that's good because he's really tough. He has the Mistletoe, which is a really powerful sword. It gives him the critical skill plus also a 20-point boost his skill, and he has like a decent amount of skill on top of that. So not only does he attack with a really powerful weapon, he also has a very solid chance to just crit you and kill you in one hit. So killing him would be very difficult. You can do it, but it's not. First of all, it's non-canon, but it's also like there's way easier way to do it, which is to talk to him with Lachesis. And this is where my grinding from last chapter paid off, because I had my Lachesis on a mount, which meant I could very easily reach him and talk to him. Lachesis is able to convince him. It takes her a little while. He says His Majesty's death will spell the death of Augustria too. So he truly believes that even though Chagall is not doing the right thing, it's his only choice. If Chagall dies, Augustria dies too, and he just doesn't want that. He cares so much about Augustria. But eventually, Lachesis is able to convince him, and he leaves. And he says, he's talking about like giving his life. He's talking about his life in the context of this quote. And he says, I'd rather risk it to stop this blasted war than to fight my friend. Any knight would do the same. And again, it's more posturing about what it means to be a knight. He's kind of flip-flopping back and forth on this one. And I get why it's Lachesis and no one else who's able to convince him. I don't know. I just thought it's a little weird. Like, make up your mind. What is a knight to you? Yeah, it's kind of limited by just the way conversations work in this game. But I just his character writing isn't entirely consistent, and I'm not a huge fan of that. I used to love Eldigone. I really, really did. And I do love Ares. Maybe I'll change my mind on that too, but really getting a deep dive into this writing has sort of made me question that maybe he's not such a great character after all. I don't know. He's fine. Like, I don't think he's bad or anything. A lot of people call him stupid or like one of the worst Camus in the series, and I don't know about all that. I think he's perfectly serviceable to the story. I don't love him as much as I used to. He gives Lachesis, as he leaves, he gives Lachesis an Earth Sword, and the reason I say that this is canon is because Nana has it in Thracia. It's her personal. Is it her personal weapon? I think it is. And so this conversation clearly happened, but it's kind of a shame. I mean, like, obviously I wouldn't want to do it anyway, but I think it makes more sense for Eldigone to like die on the battlefield here. I don't know. I think it would help his character overall stand out more and be a little bit less flaky and inconsistent. But he gives it to Lachesis and tells her that it's in case he doesn't come back, he wants her to like have something to protect herself or something like that. And she kind of like has second thoughts about this because she's like, wait, no, actually don't go back because you'll probably die. But he does anyway, and that's exactly what happens. Chagall labels him a traitor and just cuts his head off, like right then and there. He just kills him. Or not personally, he gets someone else to do it, of course, because it's Chagall. But yeah, Eldigone's dead. And that's really grim. Like, this doesn't have a happy ending other than you don't have to fight Eldigone, and you don't. His units don't even go away. Like his battalion, his cross knights. So you have to fight them still too. There's no way to avoid killing all of them. I mean, I guess if you get around them somehow and capture the castle without them dying, but then I think they just assume they die anyway. And this is where we first meet Trevant, and Trevant. Oh boy, I want to talk about Trevant. He basically doesn't do anything this chapter, but I'm going to give you a little sneak preview of some of the stuff we're going to talk about, especially starting in Chapter 5, because that's where, and like Chapter 5 and then some Gen 2 chapters, because I'm going to say it right here and now. I'm going to get it out there, make sure my opinion on this is heard loud and clear. Trevant is the best villain, not only in this game. I think he's the best villain in the entire history of the franchise, and that is not an exaggeration. This series isn't particularly known for its great villains. There are a few that I really like in this game. There's a couple really good ones. Arvis is a fantastic one. I would argue even maybe Reptor, just because of how conniving he is and how easy he is to just hate. Leon from FE8 is another one of my favorites. I think Ashnerd from FE9 is fantastic. Some of the characters from FE10, etc. But for the most part, the series does not have particularly interesting villains. Trevant is far and away the best villain in the series, in my opinion. Maybe not far and away. I think there's a few that come close, but I'm going to talk more about this in later chapters. I don't want to dwell too much on it here because, I mean, he has like 4 lines in this chapter, so obviously nothing he does here is particularly noteworthy. But I just wanted to mention it because he's here, and I'm already excited to talk about him because he's responsible for one of my favorite narrative moments in the entire series. And he sends his Draco Knights to assault. I don't know. They come from the northwest of the map, and I think they kind of just go for whoever is closest to them. Other than Aaron's Pegasus Knight unit, who you can technically avoid fighting at all, these are the first flyers I think you've had to deal with, and Draco Knights are a lot scarier than Pegasus Knights. That's for sure. Especially since you're probably dealing with them with Lewin, and then now theoretically, I mean, Lewin's probably nowhere near anywhere to help with this. I mean, I guess he could be. They're scary. They ended up going for Lachesis, and as a result, they were not scary at all. They did like 3 damage to her, and I don't think she quite one rounded them, but she came close. And yeah, it was really easy to just take care of them all. And then as soon as like the turn after the boss of that squad dies, Trevant just leaves. So it's pretty anticlimactic. Again, he doesn't do anything. He makes a comment about like it kind of shows how he's opportunistic because he makes a comment about how he's getting out of this before Augustria loses. Basically, he describes it as like them going down with a sinking ship, more or less. Oh yeah, so at this point you're on your way to go capture the western castle where Chagall is, and I thought to myself, okay, well, sometimes this game will have conversations between people, like if you send one person to the home castle and then have another person go into the home castle, they might have a conversation together. So it's not unprecedented. It happens a lot in Chapter 5. I think it also happens, there's like one between Quan and Ethelyn at some point. So I thought, maybe if Sigurd goes to the home castle, he'll have some dialogue where he finds out that Deirdre's missing. Nope. I mean, I know it's just like a idiosyncrasy between the gameplay, and you can't really expect him to account for everything, but I just thought it was so weird. Like, you can go into the home castle, clearly see that Deirdre is not there. Shannon, presumably, is there still, and just nothing happens. There's nothing he can do about it. Instead, you find out when he captures the castle that Chagall is in. So let's cut to that right now. I mean, Chagall was pretty easy. I took him out. I think it was Sigurd. No, who was it? Someone like that. He drops a silver blade, which is kind of nice. That'll be good on Sigurd. Oh, let me talk about this right now because I'm probably not going to have an excuse to talk about this again for a little while. I got my first 50 kill weapon, and to the surprise of nobody, it was Sigurd's Silversword. The way crits work in this game, much like double attacking, is that not everyone can do it. Most games, everyone can critical. In this game, only people who have the critical skill can perform critical hits. And that changes a lot of the dynamics. I mean, there's no crit farming, basically, like you can do with some crit builds in later games. But crits are really powerful. They're way stronger than they are in most games in this game because the way the math works out, it's different. They use a different damage formula, more or less. Now, there's a few ways around this. Obviously, there's the Killer Bow, which Jamp joins with, which grants you critical. I don't think it has any innate crit on it. I think it just lets you crit with it, using your percentage chance to crit, which is your skill in this game. The other way around it is to have a weapon that has killed more than 50 characters, or I think just 50. It starts at 50. And for every kill over 50, you get +1 crit on that weapon. So, for example, say Sigurd has like 15. I think he has like 20 skill or something like that. So at 50 kills, the Silver Sword will have a 20% chance to crit. But then at 100 kills, it has a 70% chance to crit, and by the time it's really easy to steamroll with it because obviously getting crit on it will make it easier to get kills with it. So it is very easy to rack up kills on this thing, and obviously Sigurd makes really good use out of it. And I think for most people, it's probably going to be the first weapon that has 50 plus kills on it. The only other one that I ever see come close is like maybe Forseti, if you're really trying to make Lewin do something. But otherwise, it's like that, and then maybe the Gen 1 Brave Sword if you really go hard on it. But even then, you got I guess you have 3 chapters to make use of it, so that's pretty good. Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that because this is where I realized that it had 50 kills on it. I think he got a crit. I was like, oh, cool, that's awesome. I can do that now. Anyway, he kills Chagall, He's probably not going to use that silver blade because, I have the silver sword now, so there's not really a point. But he has it, and he can sell it for money, I guess. Now, you capture the castle, and this is when Shannon shows up and tells Sigurd what happened, and he's very distraught, obviously. His wife is missing. His son is safe. He's like, his initial reaction is obviously like, oh god, that's horrible. But then he's like, Shannon, where is my son? And he's like, I have Seliph right here. He dragged Seliph across the fucking country for some reason. I don't know. There's another infamous moment like this coming up in chapter 5, but this is the first time we see it. Shannon just drags an infant across the map somehow. I don't get it. He's Shannon is very distraught. This is why I would like to say that it's a important character moment for him, because he's very upset. He sees it as him failing in his responsibility that Sigurd entrusted him with. I mean, obviously he's just a child. There's nothing he could have done about it. Honestly, I didn't touch on this at all because I was kind of, there was a lot going on, but I think that Deirdre is just really goddamn stupid. I'm sorry. I know there's people who like Deirdre, and I do too. I like her dynamic with Sigurd. I think it's really cute, but man, she knows that these people are after her. It's been established in dialogue that she knows there's a cult looking for her, and that if they find her, they're gonna bring about the end of the world. And she's just like, I'm just gonna go hang out with my boo thing, and yeah, more or less causes the reestablishment of Satanism. I guess that's a insult on Satanism. Honestly, Satanists don't kill people. Satanists don't sacrifice children to their dark god. At least none of the ones that I know. So a lot of stuff happens here. So you might think, okay, well, Chagall's gone, so the chapter must be over, right? Well, if you look north, you'll see there's another castle there, so obviously we have one more to go. And this is where the Orgahil pirates come into the picture. Earlier I mentioned that there were some pirates that kind of broke Brigid's orders and went to go pillage the mainland without her permission. And you kind of have to stop them from doing that. That's, the anti-turtling incentive for the map is to just go around and make sure that none of them get to any of the villages. So she kind of confronts them on that here and says that they went too far, and now Sigurd and his army are going to come looking for them and put an end to them, and it's all their fault. And at this point, the pirates have apparently decided that they have had enough and they're no longer going to put up with it. And they actually decide that they're just going to kill Brigid. And so yeah, they kick her out and they start to chase after her. And that's one thing that's going on. Oh, and they also build a bridge to connect their island to the mainland so that you can go and fight them, because there was no connection there before. Now, at this point, Claude comes out of the Tower of Bragi, which is kind of to the west of this island where Brigid is fighting. And turns out that he has found the truth, and he doesn't spell it out explicitly, but he says basically that it's exactly as he suspected, which means that he has found out that it is in fact Reptor and Langbalt that have killed Kurth and are trying to use this to manipulate themselves into power. He also managed to find Valkyria, which is our first holy weapon, and it's not a weapon. It's the legendary staff that can bring the dead back to life. So I should talk a little bit about how the holy weapons work. About half of them are usable by the playable units, and there's 12 of them in total. I guess 13 if you count the bad guy one. There's 3 swords, 2 lances, an axe, a bow, one of every type of magic, and then staff. They're only usable by one member of a family per generation. So Claude is the one that can use the Valkyria staff, which is the legendary holy weapon staff. This one obviously isn't used in combat, but what it can do is it can bring back the dead. And there's a cute moment here where Tell2 refers to it as a grubby little cane, and no reverence whatsoever. It's funny, but Claude is explaining how it works, and Tell2 kind of asks when he tells her that it can bring back the dead. She says, "Oh, so you're saying this can bring my dear old grandma back to life?" And he kind of explains, "No, that's not how it works." And he starts to go into why that wouldn't work before she kind of decides that she's no longer going to listen to him and just goes to do something else. And he gets fed up with it, but the way he starts the conversation is that he explains that every living person has a life force known as quintessence. And this is where he gets cut off, but I just think that's a fun little FE7 reference. Quintessence is a big thing in that game. It's like the whole point of the conflict. So, I don't know. It's a fun little word. I don't know what it was. I cannot imagine that is the literal Japanese translation, but I guess I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that's just meant to be a reference. And, obviously from a meta perspective, it's meant to be an explanation as to why, if you have Valkyria in Gen 2, why do you not just bring everyone's dead parents back to life? More or less, I think it's supposed to just be that after a certain amount of time that they have been dead, it no longer works. So that's just kind of, it's to fill a plot hole there. Like, why can't they just bring Sigurd back to life or something? But it's cute. I like the reference. I'm glad that they put it in. I love this translation so much. I think that's one of my favorite lines in the whole translation. And this is where we get control of these three. Let's start with Bridget, I guess. Let's talk about Bridget. Bridget is a sniper. And she's like a badass pirate lady, basically. And that's cool. I like that. And that's really all there is to her character, though. I know she was kidnapped when she was a little girl. And she, accepts her birthright as being member of House Jungbi. And that's really it, at least in this chapter. She's a good person. She wants to establish her pirate group as being like good guys. Again, that doesn't really make any sense of why she would want to do that, or why, if she has been doing that, they have been putting up with it for so long. But, it's narratively inconsistent, but I guess it's something. And other than just being badass, that's really all there is. A fun fact, and I'm willing to bet that the people who have played both games might not even know this. Bridget comes back as a sword master in Thracia 776, named Avel. And, I'm sure most people would probably figure it out because they look very similar. I don't think Finn even knows, actually, which is weird because they can meet. I guess it's explained by the fact that, well, I'll get into that later. But yeah, maybe there'll be more to talk about with her there, but she's just not that interesting in this game, at least not in this chapter. As a unit, she gets the Ufel, which is a legendary bow. We'll talk about that more when she gets it, but it makes her combat amazing, like, so good. Probably the best combat unit that we have right now. Although, honestly, Jamk is probably just as effective at killing enemies, which is weird. I guess she can do it without eating a counter, which is nice, but with all the skills that Jamk has to attack more than once, it's pretty easy for him to just clear out enemies. But the problem that both of them have, obviously, is that they just can't get anywhere because, say it with me now, they are footlocked. And that's a really big deal in this game. I've already talked about it, why that is twice. I'm not going to do it again, but just know they have... I'm talking about Jamk still, but Bridget, more importantly, has godly combat, but just can't get anywhere with it. She just can't find the enemies to fight, so it doesn't make a difference. Tail2 and Claude are the same way. Claude is just a staff bot. He joins with Fortify, he joins with Major Bragi Blood, which means that he can use every staff in the game, including Valkyria, and that's good. He can Physic, he can Rescue, he can Fortify, he can do all this important stuff. He can Warp, Restore, Return if you want him to, or just use a basic Ment staff, whatever you want to do. And Claude's your guy. The fact that he's on foot makes it sometimes hard for him to be super useful, but Aideen's been doing alright, and there's a lot that you can do just from staying in the home castle, actually. Or, if you're lagging behind, you can have your injured mounted units like go back a little bit, have Aideen heal him up, and then get back into the fray really easily. And the fact that Claude joins with the Fortify makes it even easier for him to do stuff like that, so that's cool. I kind of like him. I kind of like him as a character. Again, he has probably about as much going on, or I guess as little as going on as Bridget does, but he is kind of just like a cool dude who gets wrapped up in this whole situation. I guess this is kind of a spoiler in the beginning of next chapter, but he also gets branded as a traitor when shit eventually pops off, and Sigurd feels really bad about having dragged him into that, but he's really cool about it. He just says, like, listen, man, it's not your fault. These things happen. He's just chill. He's just a cool dude. He's a bro. I like him. Also, he has the same name as one of the best characters in the series, so we take those. Tail2, I've already talked about why I like her as a character. I think she's probably my favorite out of this bunch. She just has so much, like, immediate personality, which it's hard to do. I mean, people complain about this in later games, in the newer games, where characters have like single personality traits that they wear on their sleeves, and it's just really obvious what they're about in one glance. And this is kind of an instance of that, although I'm much more willing to accept it here because there aren't really a whole lot of alternatives. It's either that or you just have characters like Bridget who just have nothing going on. And, or I guess maybe someone like Azel. Azel has basically nothing going on. So, other than just being a tragic little Shota boy. So Tale 2 has that distinction of being, it's really obvious what she's about. She's like hyper and goofy, and that's just fun. I think that's a fun character trait to have. So I'm cool with it. Some people might not like it. And for gameplay, she is fun. She's a lot of fun. But I would say that she is arguably the worst character in the first generation, depending on what you value. It's between her and Arden, the armor knight from Prologue. I think that Tale 2 gives you more. First of all, they're both bad. No matter what context you look at this in, they're both bad. But in terms of determining who is the worst, you have to look at a few things. I think that Tale 2 gives you more free utility. She joins with a skill called Wrath, which basically means when she's at low HP, she will always crit, which is really fun. It makes her pretty good at clearing out the arena. And if there are instances where she can get to combat, she's pretty good at dealing with enemies, assuming that you're able to keep her in reasonably good health and taking advantage of Wrath when it's safe to do so, basically. But if you're willing to train both, like if you're deciding, okay, well, I want to use a bad unit this run, who's going to be the easiest one to use out of the two? It's definitely Arden, just because he has the extra chapters of availability and also gets the Pursuit ring for free. Tale 2 does not have Pursuit, so that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, they're both terrible. It's just a matter of what you value for, if you want to argue who's worse. The point is that Tale 2 might just be the worst unit in the game from a gameplay perspective. So at this point, there's a lot of conversations. There are a few conversations in this map, not as many as Chapter 2, but all of them are after you capture this castle, except for the Brave Sword one. I think that's the only one that you can get before you capture the castle where Chagall was at. The first one is between Ethlyn and Quan, and basically, we're just getting all the holy weapons right now. Ethlyn gives Quan the Gaybolg, which is a lance, his legendary lance. He's able to he has the major holy blood for his house, so he's able to use the legendary weapon, and apparently it has some kind of sad legend associated with it, where, I mean, she doesn't go into any details. They're very vague about it, but basically, the reason she didn't give it to him right away, even though she's had it this whole time, apparently, which you might want to give him that to deal with Eldigone when you found out you were fighting Eldigone. It might have been nice to have a legendary weapon to match his, but I guess she just didn't want to give it to him. And the reason for that is, I guess there's some kind of sad legend associated with it. I'm assuming it's just like, kind of like the Armads in FE7, where whoever uses this will die a horrible death or something like that. So that's why she hesitated. And he basically said, like, I'm not going to let a fairy tale get in the way of, helping my family and being there for them in their hours of need. So don't worry, I'm not going to die, I'm going to live. Yeah, sure. And then Ethlyn has a moment where she kind of, she gets really sad because of what happened to Deirdre, and she's worried that the same thing's going to happen to them. She's worried that they're going to be separated and that they won't find each other again. And she has a real moment of vulnerability here where she cries to Quan, and it's touching. It's really touching. And it gives, I mean, I can't say that it particularly characterizes Ethlyn well because it's just her being sad. But, I mean, it's a sad moment, because, I mean, especially if you've played this game before, you know that, no, Sigrid does not find Deirdre. She's gone forever. And Quan tries to comfort her and say, oh, we'll find her soon. And it's just tragic. It's a really sad moment that has a lot of layers to it if you've played the game before. Most holy weapons, I don't actually know if Valkyria does this, but all the holy weapons that you can use in combat give stat boosts. And Gable gives plus 10 skill, strength, and defense. I actually didn't write down what's it, the UFLs, so I'll have to grab those real quick. Hold on. So it makes Sigurd even tankier, or sorry, not Sigurd, it makes Quan even tankier than he already was, so that's cool. I mean, we don't really have a whole lot of time to play around with it, but I guess I don't even think it saw combat once in this whole map, so I guess we'll talk about that more later though. So Brigid and Claude and Teal 2 start in a very awkward starting situation. This is one of the only opportunities that Teal 2 is going to get to shine because she starts near some enemies. She can get herself injured on them and then proc Wrath a whole bunch, and that's a lot of fun. Gives her a very strong first impression, but obviously that's not going to last super long. Brigid is really good. She one-rounds all the pirates chasing her. I think she even doubles their Myrmidons, which she's just so fast. She's crazy fast. And yeah, she takes them all down really easily. But there's just so many of them that you're going to have to go and help her at some point. And Claude obviously can't defend himself, and Teal 2's pretty frail, so it's a sticky situation, and you can easily do what I do a lot of the time, and auto-save your way into a corner. And I didn't do it this time, thankfully, but I have done it in the past, so I'm glad that it didn't happen. I got some real good luck, just in this chapter in general, but Teal 2 got like 4 speed level ups here, and she also only got hit twice. And of course, they were both on the same turn, so she died, and I had to reset. But she got attacked probably at least 10 to 12 times, and she only got hit twice. And they have like really decent hit chances on her. They have like high 50% chance to hit her. So I got really lucky there. Fun Teal 2. I'm going to try to train Teal 2 just because of that. A lot of the time I'll base who I'm using on the level ups they get. You know, if they're getting some good level ups, I'm like, alright, well, going to use you now just because you're doing so well for me. I mean, there's no reason to not do that, right? So once you get them out of this starting situation, which is relatively easy to do, you can send Claude back to the home castle where he can use the Valkyria stat. You can only use the Valkyria in the home base. And once you do that, you can bring Aira back to life if your Aira is dead, like mine was. So she's back, and we'll do her conversation in a little bit, but I just wanted to say that she is back now. You get like a full level from using the Valkyria staff. You only get one use of it before you have to repair it, which costs 50,000 gold because every holy weapon costs 1,000 gold per use to repair. Most of them are weapons that have 50 uses, so it's fine. But for Claude, he only gets the one use, so using it just once requires 50,000 gold to repair it back up to full. It's pretty crazy, but I mean, you know, it's really powerful effect, so I guess it makes sense just to balance it a little bit. Aideen and Brigid have a conversation where Aideen realizes that she is her sister and gives her the Ufel. And again, we're getting a whole lot of holy weapons this time around. It gives some lore on how the holy weapons work, which I've already talked about, so I'm not going to go into it here, but she gets it. And the Ufel gives her plus 10 strength and plus 10 speed. It also grants them the skill renewal, which is better in this game than it is in most games. It actually replenishes like a solid amount of HP per turn, unlike in later games where it's like 10% or something really low like that, so that's nice. So now that Aira is alive, we can do the Brave Sword conversation, and there's 2 possible characters you can do this with. You can have Holland give it to her, or have Lex give it to her, and both of them will have the same result. She'll get the Brave Sword, and they will get 100 love points together as a pair. And I wanted to see which conversation was funnier, I guess, basically. So I did them both. Holland's was pretty milquetoast. They just like kind of go back and forth a little bit, like, "Oh, hi, take this, it'll help you." And you're like, "Oh, she actually says, shouldn't you be using this?" And he's like, "No, I want you to have it." Oh, he there's a little bit of a story gameplay integration here where he says, he basically references Astra and says, "You burned through sword juice so fast, then I figured you could use a new one." So she takes it, and it's just, you know, they're pretty friendly and simple towards each other. Lex, on the other hand, she is not happy about this. I don't know why she doesn't like Lex for some reason, but he goes to talk to her, and she's like, "Listen, fuck off. I don't want to talk to you. Go give your presents to one of the other girls." You know, because she's hashtag not like the other girls. And Lex kind of gets defensive about it. He's like, "Hey, yo, what's your deal? I don't know why you're being so aggressive towards me." It's never properly explained. I don't know what kind of history they have together that makes them so like hostile towards, or that makes her so hostile towards him. But as soon as she realizes it's a brave sword, she kind of is like, "Oh, that's actually really nice of you. Thank you. I was not expecting this." So it's a cute conversation. I like that one a lot more. Holland is the better dad overall, as I've talked about, in my opinion. But Lex has some fun conversations here with her, and I think a lot of people really enjoy pairing them for a few reasons. I think this is one of them. I think they have a cute dynamic here. Madeira and Bridget have a conversation here. I talked about this, I think, in chapter 1, where it's really the only conversation that he has that has any sort of interesting dialogue. But he basically kind of, like, he first of all, he mistakes her for Aideen, and there's a little bit of a gag there with that. But then he realizes that it's not her, and he kind of blurts out that she's beautiful, and she gets exasperated and is like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And he just starts talking to himself about how she he he says again, I can't express enough how much I love this translation, but he says, not like mumbling or anything. As far as I can tell, he's saying it out loud to her face. He says, "There's another one." Like, he's just like, "Oh man, there's two Aideen's." And I think he says like, "This one's even more beautiful" or something like that. So it's funny. I think it's a cute conversation. And she kind of just gets annoyed and walks off. And then the last thing that I want to talk about for events in this map is this very difficult to get event that I have no idea how you were supposed to figure this out before you had access to guides. If you bring Dew to the entrance of the Bragi Tower, there's a fun little event here where basically a ghost I mean, I'm pretty sure it's a ghost. There's no other explanation given. So I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a ghost. Basically tells him to get off this sacred ground and scares him off, basically. And as he's leaving, he finds a wind sword, which is just, I believe, the only ranged physical sword in the game. The flame sword and the bolt sword are both magic based at range, so, and the light brand and the earth sword, I think, all of them. So this is kind of a unique item, and actually something that I usually leave on Dew, but now that I'm thinking about it, is probably much better in the hands of someone like Sigurd or something. I'm gonna try that. I'm probably gonna give it to him at the beginning of next chapter and just see how that goes over for me. I'm pretty sure it does physical damage at range. I'm gonna have to check that. I might correct myself next episode if I'm wrong about that. And now I want to do some housekeeping because this isn't revealed to you and is kind of a nasty surprise. I guess it's supposed to just be like, it's supposed to feel natural, and it's obviously not. It's something that they want to drop on you so that you're not like playing around it, I guess. But Finn, Ethlyn, and Quan are all leaving at the beginning of next chapter. They don't even have the preps like Deirdre did for this chapter. They just leave at the beginning of the next map. So if you want any good items off of them, you're gonna have to get off of them, or any good items on them for that matter. You're gonna have to get them. You're gonna have to do that now. So that's what I did. I don't think I changed anything about Quan. I mean, Quan's inventory passes down to Altena, who's one of the last units to join in Gen 2, so I don't think it's really that relevant. So he has the Gable, and I think he had like a silver lance or something like that. I don't know, pretty basic stuff. Ethlyn, I gave, obviously she has the light brand, and then I also gave her the bargain band. Leaf wants a lot of, Leaf is kind of similar to Lycessus. He starts as a foot locked unit and promotes to Master Knight, just like Lycessus did. So he wants to have a lot of things. He wants to have the Paragon Band. He wants to have the Pursuit Ring and maybe some good weapons. But instead of passing all that down to him and being without it for the next 2 maps, I decided I would just give him the Bargain Band. I don't really need the Bargain Band terribly much, and I'd rather just have him have it so he can get the Paragon Band and stuff like that really easily. And yeah, I hope I don't miss it too much, but I think I'll be okay. I'm not planning on passing around any super expensive items for the most part. Maybe a couple times with like the Night Ring or the Leg Ring. Maybe the Pursuit Band, although that's probably staying right on Noish where it belongs. I never talked about the Leg Ring, did I? No. Okay, so one of the bosses drops, basically, all the stat boosters are items in your inventory that just give you passive boosts. They're not consumable items. And the Leg Ring is the equivalent of the boots in this context. It gives you +3 movement. I think I got it on Azel or something, and I just gave it to, I think, Lewin. Sigurd is probably the best recipient of it, especially for Seliph, and I might give it to him later. But I want Lewin, at least for the next chapter, because he's really important in the next chapter, story-wise. So I want him to have some opportunities to do some stuff gameplay-wise there too, and I think that having him use the leg ring will be nice. It'll also give him some money, which he can use to repair Forseti and then pass stuff down onto his kid. I don't know. There's some viable reasons for getting it on him. Although I guess the money argument doesn't make any sense because I spent a lot of money to get it on him, but whatever. It's not actually that expensive. It's only 20,000 gold, which isn't a lot. For context, the Paragon and Pursuit Band are both 40,000. I did some arena-ing. Got as many people through as much of the arena as I could. I got the Brave Sword onto Beowulf, and I'm probably going to pass it around for easier arena performance. But I think that at the end of the day, it's probably going to end up on Beowulf anyway, and it's going to get passed down to Diarmid because I'm marrying him to Lachesis. And I think that's just a good play. I mean, if you're not going to pass it down to Seliph, you might as well just pass it down to someone who either Seliph. I guess I could give it to Neusch because he's gonna pass it down to Ulster. Does anyone who passes down a sword to a chapter 6 joining sword using kid is probably fine. So I decided to go with Beowulf, although I guess I could give it to Neusch. And I think that is everything that I wanted to talk about. So let's go ahead and end this map. Once you capture the pirate castle with Sigurd, then some shit goes down. This is where the story really pops off. Reptor and Langbolt show up with their respective armies, and this is the first time we're seeing them having speaking lines. We saw them in the opening narration at the beginning of the game, but here they are in all their glory, and they kind of muse to themselves about how this is all going perfectly. They're twirling their mustaches and everything's going according to plan. What happened basically was Langbolt personally killed Kurth and nearly killed Byron, and presumably took Byron captive because he's not dead. We know that from later chapters, but he is still alive. And again, I assume that House Dozel, which is where Langbolt is from, took him captive. They also talk about how Arvis is apparently on their side and using his favor with the king to manipulate him into doing what they want, basically. So this kind of confirms that, Arvis himself has actually had no dialogue since prologue, so they're keeping his views on the matter very enigmatic, which is interesting and I like it. But Arvis has been helping them and has been, manipulating things from behind the scenes. So as far as the player knows at this point, Arvis is in the same camp as these fellows. We cut back to Sigurd, who finds out that Reptor and Langbolt are here, and he really has basically an existential crisis because everything's going terribly for him right now. He had to kill, well, I guess he didn't kill him, but he had to fight his best friend, and his best friend died, and his wife is missing, and now his country has turned on him, and he's being labeled a traitor. So basically everything that he's been fighting for up to this point has just vanished in front of his eyes, and he's really not happy about it. And yeah, he's just miserable. And before he really has any time to talk about it or express anything beyond that, we get a visit from someone from Celice named Manya, who is a Pegasus rider who brings a message that the Queen of Celice, which is where Lewin is from, by the way, remember, has offered Sigurd sanctuary while this whole thing gets cleared up. The way the layout is presented, Celice is basically in the northeast of the map, and Augustria is in the northwest of the map, and they're basically going to fly over the ocean to get to Celice from Augustria. Sigurd tries to be like, wait, why is she doing this? I've never done anything for her in my life, and Manya basically says, we don't have time for that, we gotta get out of here before things get ugly. And Sigurd says, okay, let's go with you. I think it would be kind of awkward if Lewin was dead. I don't know if he actually dies. I think he might just retreat in the story. I haven't gotten him killed off yet, so I might kill him off on purpose and just reload a save just to see what happens and what his dialogue is like. Although I guess it wouldn't matter post chapter 4. So we get two parable moms this map. We get Brigid and Tailtu, and they're both pretty interesting. Tailtu especially. Tailtu, I talked about her in the episode proper, and she's kind of garbage. But her kids actually can be good. Well, at least one of them can be. Her children are Arthur and Tinny. And Arthur is a mage that joins you in chapter 6. Tinny is a thunder mage that joins you in chapter 7, like halfway through chapter 7. It doesn't sound like a big difference, but it is, because the maps keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's like the equivalent of, I guess, the gap in availability between Lachesis and Tail-2. You know, no one would say that that's a small gap in availability. It's not massive, but it's not nothing. Tinny is not that good. No matter what you do, in fact, there's an argument to be made that her substitute is better, because she gets, I think, Paragon and... Is it Wrath? I don't know. I don't remember if it's Wrath. Here, let me check this. Yeah, okay, so it's Wrath and Paragon. Both of those are really good skills. No Holy Blood. I don't think... Wait. Oh, she does have Holy Blood. Man, she's just good. Yeah, I think she's just straight up better than Tinny. Which is unfortunate because Tinny is like my favorite character in the game. I've already talked about this. But yeah, in terms of her quality as a gameplay unit, you're really not going to get anywhere with her. There's a couple ways. Like, obviously she wants someone with Pursuit. So Azel's kind of nice. He gives Arthur Pursuit too. Azel also gives them a really high magic growth, which is pretty cool. Really any magic dad, Claude, I guess could work. Yeah, I think those are really the only the only magical dads, except for the big fish himself, Lewin. Now Lewin is really hard to pair with Tail-2. I wouldn't say really hard. It's doable, but you have to be careful not to let him get too close with Sylvia or with Aaron, because both of those characters will have very quick love growths with him in events to raise it up, and it'll just cause problems in general. So you have to be careful with that. But the reward is absolutely worth the investment and the time it takes to set that up, because if you do this, Arthur joins with Forsetti in chapter 6, which is crazy. The chapter 6, for context, is the first Generation 2 chapter. So it's the equivalent of prologue for the second half of the game, basically. And it is, having a holy weapon that early on is crazy. You actually do get another one at the beginning of chapter 7, so it's not like you have to wait that long to get a different one, but it's still really cool to have it. And of course he doesn't get Pursuit, but first of all, you can always pass him the Pursuit band, or you can just rely on Adept procs, because he's going to proc it all the time, because he's going to have a crazy high speed growth and plus 20 speed from Forsetti right out of the gate. So, I mean, this is all assuming that you get Forsetti on Lewin, but the game is gives you pretty clear directions on how to get it. So, I think that's a pretty easy thing to assume that people are going to do. And it's honestly not that bad for Tinny as well. She gets hurt by the lack of Pursuit a lot, but she will also get a really good speed growth and will start proccing Adept relatively reliably. The other thing she gets is she has a conversation with him at one point that gives her plus 5 magic, which is really nice. That's the equivalent of a magic ring. He just gives it to her, essentially. I mean, he doesn't actually give her a magic ring, but she just gets a plus 5 boost to her magic stat, which is cool. And it's one of the few ways you can make her work. I mean, I'm going to give all my favoritism to Tinny anyway, so it doesn't really make much of a difference, but, you know, it is what it is. Brigid has kids that she's kind of similar to Sylvia in the sense that her kids don't really matter. One of them is going to be good no matter what, one of them is going to be bad no matter what, and the substitutes aren't really that much different. So her kids are Patty and Feebal. There's a few different translations for his name. I don't really know. I don't know which this one goes with. I think it's Feebal in this one. Patty is a thief and therefore is always going to be good. At least as good as Do is, and if you're playing around him, he's pretty good. I mean, I haven't really been making good use of him this run, but that's not like his fault. That's just me not really planning around him and using him effectively. So Patty's really good, and Daisy's really good. Daisy's the substitute, so honestly you could go either way. I'm thinking about not pairing Brigid this run at all, actually. I'd like to use some substitutes for once in my life, and like I said, the substitutes don't really change that much about how the characters play. You're still going to be doing the same things with Daisy as you are with Patty. In terms of what father is best for them, I like to go for Do. I think that Do is just a good thief dad. Having Bargain on your thief is really nice. Having he gets free access to the wind sword, which, by the way, I looked into this after the episode. It does not do. Actually, I didn't even look into it. It just says it in the game. I didn't bother to check. It does magical damage at range, just like all the other ones. So I was wrong about that. But it's still nice to have a ranged weapon that can hit on enemy resistance, which is cool. I mean, she's not going to be a combat juggernaut or anything, but she can steal gold without having to deal with a counterattack, which is cool. And Dew gets free access to that, so he can just pass it down to her. But theoretically, anyone who is her dad could pass that on to her as well. Incidentally, Bridget is another another parent-child situation where the genders are flipped. She's the only other one besides Quan and Ethelyn who the mom passes down items to the son, and the mom passes down items to the son, and the dad passes down items to the daughter. I mean, outside of Dew, there's not really a whole lot else because her stats just don't matter. If you want to make her a good combat unit, give her like Holland or something, maybe Noish. I don't know. It's kind of a fool's errand trying to get her to be good at combat. You can do it. I have done it. I do really like Patty as a character as well. So I have definitely made her good at combat, but I don't think that it was worth it, and I don't think that it's something that a lot of people are going to get a benefit out of doing. I mean, I guess it's nice to be able to just throw them into a group of enemies and steal a bunch of gold without really worrying about dying, but outside of that, it's not really worth it. So honestly, just kind of go for Dew, and if you don't, then anyone or a substitute would work fine. Her other kid is Febale, and his substitute is Asalo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Why do these two have such hard to pronounce names? They're archers, footlocked archers. One of them gets U-Fel, the other one gets I think a killer bow or a silver bow or something. And they're just like Jamk, except they join in the Gen 2 equivalent of Chapter 2. So it's like if I think like halfway through Chapter 2 as well. So I guess it's like if Jamk had Lewin's availability, you know? Like, Lewin's already not a great unit, but yeah, I don't know. Neither of them are really worth consideration in your pairings, honestly. I mean, that's not true. Patty can actually get significant improvement from having Dew as a father. But if for whatever reason you don't want to do that, maybe you want Dew to have someone else, or your Dew is dead, maybe. I don't know. There's a few reasons. Or you just mess up and you can't do it. It's really not that big of a deal, and anyone outside of Dew is pretty much equivalent. Obviously, there are going to be some people that make her better at combat, but that's just not really a big concern for her, so I wouldn't stress too much about it. Just kind of do whatever you want, and it'll be fine. But Dew is probably the preferred choice overall. And that is the end of the chapter. Not a very long one this time around. Not a whole lot going on in terms of the story. Really only major events being Deirdre not dying, getting kidnapped. Augustria is gone now, basically not a factor in the story anymore. I don't even think we hear anything about it until I don't even think we hear anything about it in Gen 2. I think it's just unimportant. So where does this rank in our map gauntlet? Because if you remember correctly, Prologue has been our reigning champ for a few weeks now, because the competition has just been so awful. And I think that this is going to be the first week where Prologue gets beaten out by something. And I don't know this for a fact. I do remember fondly some Generation 2 maps, but this might be the winner for the whole game. I do really like this map. I think it's one of the most interesting, and especially in Gen 1, there's really nothing else that even comes close. Chapters 1 and 2 are super boring. Prologue is fine, but not anything to write home about. And then from what I remember of chapters 4 and 5, they are also, I think chapter 4 just kind of sucks as well. I don't think it's as bad as 1 or 2, but it's not that much better. And then 5 is fine, kind of the same deal as Prologue. So this might be the winner for at least Generation 1, but I could be wrong. Maybe I'll be surprised. Maybe something about chapter 4 or 5 will impress me enough. But yeah, I mean, I guess I've talked a little bit about why I like this map so much. It starts you out in a really interesting position where you have to fight against multiple groups of enemies, which is something that the game doesn't really do a whole lot of in the future. I mean, it does it in chapter 5, but then after that, like at the very beginning of chapter 5, but then you don't have to do it at all later in chapter 5. After that, it's just one big linear path. So I don't remember if any other Gen 2 maps do that. Maybe they do, I don't remember. I think like chapter 8 might do it or something. I don't know. But even after you clear out those initial starting enemies, the map maintains that level of interest for the most part. I think having to deal with Eldigone and play around him, and especially if you don't have a promoted Lachesis, which most people probably will not, having to figure out how to get her in a position to talk to him without dying is difficult, and it's interesting. If you're not seeing, I mean, I guess you can see the castle before the cutscene happens, but if you're not sure like how the pirates are going to come into the picture, you might have most of your good units dealing with Chagall, and then all of a sudden you have to rush back to the castle to deal with that. Nowadays, I always have units set up and ready to deal with that, but if you're playing for the first time, you wouldn't have any reason to do that. So that's another place in the map. There's a few places I mentioned at the beginning of the map. Foot units can contribute, and then also there's this place where you're dealing with a lot of enemies on this bridge, and characters like Azel and Lewin and Jam can chip from a distance, and maybe sometimes even pick up kills because they're really good at combat for the most part. Azel's not that great, but Lewin and Jamk are pretty good. So it's more than most maps give foot units in this game, and that's something to admire, I think. The initial starting position of Claude and Tiltu and Bridget is also really cool, and I'm a big fan of that. It's high stress, and there's a lot of pressure, and you can easily mess up, but it's still fun, and I enjoy it a lot. So for all those reasons, I think that this map is probably the best in Gen 1, maybe the whole game, I don't know. Kind of telling that's not even, there are maps in this series that I could go on about for hours, some of my favorites in the whole series. This is not one that I would say is my favorite in the whole series, and the fact that I'm pretty adamant it's going to be one of the best in the game is kind of telling that the map design in this game is not particularly great. There are a lot of things to love about this game, but the map design, in my opinion, not really one of them. You might disagree though, and that's fine. So I think that's going to do it for me this week. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you had, and I hope you have a very wonderful new year and happy 2021. I will talk to you all next week. Bye-bye.